The chamber was built to intimidate. That was its only purpose. Ambassador David Webb understood this the moment he stepped through the massive doors and into the grand tribunal hall of the galactic sovereignty. The ceiling stretched upward for what seemed like miles, disappearing into darkness that pulsed with distant stars. Floating platforms held representatives from over 800 alien species, their forms ranging from crystalline giants to beings made of living smoke. Every eye, sensor, and perception organ in the room turned toward the three humans standing at the center of a platform barely 10 feet wide. David took a breath and steadied himself. Beside him stood Dr. Amara Cole, humanity's chief xenolinguist, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with the sharp focus of someone cataloging every threat. Behind them both, Colonel James Thorne remained perfectly still, his military bearing hiding the neural uplink connecting him to every human vessel within 500 light-years. They were the first humans to ever stand before the galactic sovereignty, and they had been brought here to die. The supreme arbiter rose from his throne of living metal. His name was Kolveth, and his species had ruled the sovereignty for 12,000 years. He stood 15 feet tall, his body a fusion of organic tissue and ancient technology, his face a mask of cold judgment. When he spoke, his voice vibrated through the chamber like an earthquake. Humanity of Sol 3, you have been summoned to answer for your crimes against galactic order. David did not flinch. He had prepared for this moment his entire life. Kolveth continued, his mechanical eyes fixed on the three tiny figures below. You have expanded beyond your permitted boundaries. You have developed weapons that threaten the stability of civilized space. You have contacted species under sovereignty protection without authorization. You have refused to submit to mandatory population controls. The chamber hummed with agreement. On a dozen platforms, alien representatives called for immediate judgment. Some wanted Earth reduced to rubble. Others wanted humanity enslaved. A few wanted the species erased entirely, their genetic code purged from the galaxy. The punishment for these crimes, Kolveth pronounced, is corrective intervention. Your homeworld will be placed under permanent administration. Your population will be reduced to sustainable levels. Your technology will be confiscated. Your military will be dissolved. David understood what those words really meant. He had seen the intelligence reports. Corrective intervention was genocide with better marketing. Species that received it never recovered. They became labor pools, organ farms, entertainment. He smiled. The smile confused the chamber. Prisoners did not smile before the supreme arbiter. They begged. They wept. They promised anything for mercy. Supreme Arbiter, David said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I have a counter-proposal. Silence crashed through the hall like a wave. Counter-proposals were not permitted. This was a sentencing, not a negotiation. You have observed humanity for 3 centuries, David continued. You watched us from the shadows as we crawled from our caves. You studied us as we split the atom. You monitored us as we reached beyond our world. And in all that time, you made one critical mistake. He paused, letting the silence build. You assumed that because we were young, we were stupid. Dr. Cole's tablet began to glow. She was transmitting something to every delegation in the chamber. 800 separate data streams carrying the same devastating payload. What you are receiving now, David said, is evidence. Complete, verified, irrefutable evidence of the sovereignty's systematic extermination of 43 species over the past 10,000 years, of the slave colonies hidden in the outer territories, of the resource extraction operations that violate your own founding laws. The chamber erupted. Delegates began shouting. Several species started moving toward exits that suddenly would not open. The Supreme Arbiter's mechanical form began to hum with barely contained rage. You will be silent, Colvith thundered. You are in no position to make accusations. David shook his head slowly. Supreme Arbiter, I am in the perfect position. Because while you are busy planning our extinction, we were busy preparing for this exact moment. Colonel Thorne spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but his words carried weight that silenced the chaos. 18 hours ago, Earth's Defense Initiative positioned strike groups around 42 sovereignty military installations. They are currently awaiting my signal. Colvith's form flickered with dangerous energy. You threaten the sovereignty? No, David replied. We inform you. There is a difference. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small cylinder. Every scanner in the chamber identified it as harmless. They were wrong. This device is connected to a network we have been building for 50 years. Hidden relays in asteroid fields, dormant satellites in dead systems, listening posts in places you forgot existed. When I activate it, every species in this chamber will receive humanity's complete historical archive. He held the cylinder up so all could see. Not the version you have in your databases. The real version. Every war we have fought against enemies that outnumbered us. Every impossible victory we have achieved through sheer refusal to surrender. Every weapon we have built because we knew eventually something like you would come for us. The Supreme Arbiter leaned forward. One species cannot threaten 800. Your fleet is impressive, but our combined might would obliterate your world within hours. David nodded. You are correct. If every species here united against us, we would lose. His smile returned, colder now. Eventually, he pressed the button. Every display in the chamber activated. Images flooded the screens. Humanity at war. Not the sanitized conflicts the sovereignty had observed from orbit, but the real thing. Soldiers charging into certain death at Thermopylae. Civilians fighting tanks with bottles of burning fuel in Stalingrad. Resistance fighters dying by the thousands rather than submit to occupation. And then the screens showed something else. Project Final Light. 12,000 autonomous weapons. Platforms hidden throughout. Sovereignty space. Each one capable of triggering a stellar collapse. Placed over decades by human freight ships that the sovereignty believed were carrying farming equipment. You can destroy Earth, David said softly. But if you do, we will take 93 inhabited systems with us. Not because we want to, because you left us no choice but to prepare for the worst. The chamber was frozen. So here is humanity's counterproposal. You will dismiss all charges against Earth. You will open an investigation into the sovereignty's crimes. You will grant humanity full representation in this body. And in exchange, we will share the deactivation protocols for Project Final Light and help you build something better than the empire of fear you have created. He clasped his hands behind his back. You have 1 hour to decide. And Supreme Arbiter, when you consider threatening our species again, remember this moment. Remember that we came here prepared to die. And remember that we came prepared to make dying very, very expensive. David Webb turned his back on the most powerful governing body in the galaxy and walked toward the exit. His two companions falling into step beside him. Behind them, the doors unsealed. Behind them, 800 species began to realize that everything they knew about humanity was wrong. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 12,000 weapons platforms waited for a signal that humanity hoped would never come. The diplomatic vessel Horizon drifted through the void, its engines cold, its hull scarred by weapons fire that should not have been possible. Ambassador David Webb pulled himself through the wreckage of what had been the conference room. Blood floated in zero gravity around him, some of it his own. Beside him, Dr. Amara Cole pressed a bandage against a wound on her shoulder, while Colonel Thorne worked frantically on a damaged console. They fired on us, Amara whispered, her voice carrying disbelief. We had diplomatic immunity. They fired on us. The attack had come 40 minutes after they left the tribunal hall. 3 sovereignty warships had emerged from hyperspace without warning and opened fire. The message was clear. The Supreme Arbiter had made his decision, and that decision was violence. Thorne looked up from the console, his face grim. I got a burst transmission out before they hit our communications array. Earth knows what happened. The fleet is moving. David steadied himself against a broken wall. His ribs screamed in protest. Moving where? I do not know. But Admiral Helena Cross has command. She will not let this stand. 300 light years away, Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the battleship Relentless and stared at the tactical display. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her weathered face showed nothing of the rage burning inside her. Confirmed? She asked. Captain Marcus Black nodded, his young face pale. The horizon was attacked by sovereignty vessels. Ambassador Webb's status is unknown. We have lost contact. Helena closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When she opened them, they were cold as deep space. Orders from Earth? President Thomas authorized defensive response only. We are not to engage on Lull. S engaged. Helena almost laughed. Not to engage. 3 diplomats were dying in the void, and she was supposed to wait for authorization. Set course for the tribunal station, she said quietly. Marcus stared at her. Admiral, our orders are to hold position. I heard our orders, Captain. Helena turned to face her bridge crew. 40 men and women who had served with her through 3 decades of silent preparation. I am not going to attack the sovereignty. I am going to protect it. No one understood, but everyone obeyed. 18 hours later, the Sovereignty Tribunal Station detected Earth's first fleet emerging from hyperspace. Panic spread through the Alien Council. Defense grids activated. Weapons charged. 800 species prepared for humanity's revenge. It never came. Admiral Cross positioned her fleet in a defensive perimeter around the station itself. Her ships did not fire. They did not threaten. They simply stood guard. Her message was broadcast on every frequency. The Sovereignty attacked a diplomatic vessel carrying protected representatives. Humanity would be justified in responding with force. Instead, we choose to demonstrate the difference between us. We protect, even those who would destroy us. In the tribunal hall, the Supreme Arbiter watched the human fleet through sensors that showed him every detail. He did not understand. This was not how conquered species behaved. They did not defend their conquerors. They did not show mercy, and then a new signal arrived. It came from the damaged horizon, now drifting toward the nearest inhabited system. Ambassador Webb was alive. Wounded, trapped in a dying ship, but alive. And he was still broadcasting. His voice was rough with pain, but his words were clear enough to reach every corner of the galaxy. This is Ambassador David Webb of Earth. 18 hours ago, the Sovereignty attempted to murder my delegation in violation of every law they claimed to uphold. They failed. We survived. And now I speak not just to the Sovereignty, but to every species that has suffered under their rule. On 100 worlds, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. Some had been conquered. Some had been enslaved. Some had simply learned to keep their heads down and survive. Humanity did not come to the stars looking for enemies. We came looking for friends. We came hoping to learn, to trade, to grow alongside species that had walked among the stars for millennia before we were born. What we found instead was an empire built on fear and genocide. In her chamber on the Sovereignty homeworld, Sub-Commander Lesara listened with growing horror. She was young for her species, barely 3 centuries old, and she had been raised to believe in the righteousness of sovereignty rule. But the evidence the humans had released was undeniable. Her own government had lied to her. Her own people had committed atrocities. Webb's voice continued. We do not ask you to fight for us. We do not ask you to die for us. We only ask you to see the truth. The sovereignty is not a government. It is a machine designed to consume species like yours and mine. And machines can be broken. The transmission cut out. The Horizon's power had finally failed, but the damage was done. Across the galaxy, species that had been silent for centuries began to whisper. Rebellions that had been crushed 1,000 times began to stir. And in the corridors of the Tribunal Station, delegates who had screamed for humanity's destruction began to wonder if they had chosen the wrong side. Supreme Arbiter Kolvith convened an emergency session of his War Council. The chamber was smaller than the Tribunal Hall, designed for strategy rather than spectacle. Around the table sat the military commanders of the 7 most powerful species in the sovereignty. The humans must be eliminated, growled Grand Marshal Vorith, his massive form bristling with natural armor. Their fleet is strong, but we outnumber them 100 to 1. And their hidden weapons? Asked Admiral Tyros of the Eternal Fleet. The platforms they claim to have placed throughout our space? A bluff, Vorith insisted. No species could have hidden such things from our sensors. Kolvith said nothing. He was reviewing the evidence the humans had transmitted, not the political material, the historical archive, the wars they had fought, the odds they had overcome. One image held his attention. A city called Leningrad, surrounded by enemies for 900 days. 3 million civilians trapped. 1 million dead from starvation alone. And still, the city did not surrender. Humans did not surrender. That was the problem. We cannot fight a war of attrition against them, Kolvith said finally. They will make every battle too expensive to win. Then we must strike decisively, Vorith replied. One overwhelming blow. Destroy their homeworld before they can respond. Their weapons platforms would activate, if they exist at all. Vorith slammed his fist on the table. I will not be held hostage by the threats of prey animals. Kolvith considered this. Vorith was right about one thing. They could not allow humanity to continue inspiring rebellion. Already, reports were coming in from a dozen systems. Suppressed species were organizing. Old alliances were reforming. Prepare the fleet, Kolvith ordered. But not for Earth. Not yet. Vorith frowned. Then where? The humans value their diplomats. They sent their fleet to protect strangers rather than avenge their own. The Supreme Arbiter's mechanical face twisted into something that might have been satisfaction. We will capture Ambassador Webb. We will make him an example. And when humanity watches their hero die in pieces, they will understand that defiance has a price. Aboard the crippled Horizon, David Webb regained consciousness to find alien soldiers surrounding his bed. Their weapons were trained on his chest. Their leader, a crystalline officer whose form pulsed with cold light, leaned close. Ambassador Webb, the alien said, you are now a prisoner of the galactic sovereignty. Your execution will be broadcast across the galaxy. Your species will learn what happens to those who challenge their masters. David looked at the soldiers. He looked at his restraints. He looked at the cold certainty in the alien's face, and despite everything, he smiled. You have no idea what you have just done, he said quietly. You think capturing me will break humanity's spirit. You are about to discover that it will unite them in ways you cannot possibly imagine. The alien struck him across the face. Blood filled David's mouth, but the smile remained, because somewhere in the void, Admiral Helena Cross was receiving word of his capture. And the message she sent back to Earth was simple. They took our ambassador. Now we show them how we fight. President Victoria Thomas stood before the United Nations General Assembly, and for the first time in her career, she saw complete unity in the chamber. Every nation, every faction, every political enemy she had ever made, all of them silent, all of them waiting. 16 hours ago, she said, her voice steady despite the weight crushing her heart, Ambassador David Webb was captured by sovereignty forces. They have announced his public execution will take place in 72 hours. The chamber remained silent. On the screens behind her, images of David played. His smile, his family, his 30 years of service to humanity's diplomatic corps. The sovereignty believes this will break us. They believe that watching one of our own die will teach us to submit. She paused, letting her words sink in. They are about to learn how wrong they are. On every continent, humans watched. Factory workers in Germany, farmers in Brazil, soldiers in Japan, scientists in Nigeria, children who had never known a world beyond Earth, and elders who remembered when the stars were just dreams. Effective immediately, Victoria continued, I am authorizing Operation Unified Response. Every military asset we possess will be dedicated to Ambassador Webb's rescue. Every ally we have made among the suppressed species will be called upon, and every resource humanity can muster will be directed toward one goal, bringing our people home. She looked directly into the camera. To the sovereignty, I say this. You have taken one human. You now face 8 billion. And we do not leave our own behind. 400 light years away. Admiral Helena Cross stood in the briefing room of the Relentless with her senior officers and an unexpected guest. Sub-Commander Lissara had defected 12 hours ago. She had arrived at the human fleet in a stolen shuttle, carrying data that could change everything. Now she stood before creatures she had been taught were savages, and she was asking them to trust her. The ambassador is being held on Fortress Corinth, she explained, the translation device around her neck converting her crystalline harmonics into human speech. It is the sovereignty's most secure military installation. Orbital defenses, 300 warships, ground forces in the millions. Captain Marcus Black shook his head. That is impossible to breach. Even with our full fleet, we would lose 90% of our forces before reaching the surface. Yes, Lissara agreed. A direct assault would fail. But there is another way. She activated the holographic display. The fortress appeared, rotating slowly, its defenses highlighted in red. Fortress Corinth has one weakness. Its power core. If that core were to experience a cascade failure, the entire facility would lose power for approximately 4 minutes. Enough time for a small team to reach the ambassador. Helena studied the image. And how do we cause this cascade failure? Lissara hesitated. Someone would have to infiltrate the fortress, reach the core, and trigger the overload manually. The route passes through heavy security. The person who does this will almost certainly not survive. Silence filled the room. I will do it, Lissara said quietly. My species built that fortress. I know its secrets. And I have betrayed everything I was raised to believe. Let me earn my redemption. Colonel James Thorne stepped forward. He had been recovered from the horizon 3 days ago, wounded but alive. You will not go alone. I am coming with you. Colonel, your injuries, Marcus began, are irrelevant. Thorne's voice was firm. The ambassador saved my life on the horizon. He stayed behind to draw fire while Dr. Cole and I reached the escape pods. I owe him a debt. Dr. Amara Cole spoke from the corner where she had been listening. The Suppressed Species Coalition has committed 17 vessels to this operation. They are small, but they are willing to die for this cause. David's broadcast reached them. He gave them hope. They want to return the favor. Helena looked at the faces around her. Humans and aliens, united by a common purpose. This was what David had dreamed of. Not conquest. Not domination. Partnership. Begin preparations, she ordered. We move in 48 hours. On the Sovereignty homeworld, Grand Marshal Vorath reviewed the intelligence reports with growing unease. Human ships were gathering. Suppressed species were mobilizing. And worst of all, the execution of Ambassador. Webb was becoming a rallying point rather than a deterrent. He entered the Supreme Arbiter's chamber and found Colvith staring at a display of human history. They lost 40 million soldiers in one war, Colvith said without turning. 40 million. And they continued fighting until their enemies surrendered unconditionally. Ancient history, Vorath growled. They have grown soft since then. Have they? Colvith turned. Look at what they have accomplished in 3 centuries. They went from primitive rockets to interstellar travel. They developed weapons that our scientists still cannot fully understand. They hid 12,000 platforms throughout our space without detection. If those platforms exist, they exist. Colvith's voice was certain. I have reviewed the data. The energy signatures are real. The placement is strategic. Humanity has been preparing for this war since the moment they discovered we existed. Vorath felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Doubt, what do you propose? We accelerate the execution. Broadcast it immediately. Kill the ambassador before his people can reach him. That will only enrage them further. Yes, Colvith agreed. But rage makes species careless. When they attack in fury, they will make mistakes, and we will destroy them. The order was given. Ambassador Webb would die in 12 hours instead of 72. But Colvith had underestimated how quickly humans could move when motivated. The assault force launched within the hour. 18 human vessels, 17 Allied ships, and 1 stolen Sovereignty shuttle carrying Colonel Thorne and Sub-Commander Lysara. They dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Fortress Corinth's sensor range and began their approach. Admiral Cross watched from the bridge of the Relentless. Her fleet was too far away to help directly. This mission belonged to the small ships, the volunteers, the desperate, and the determined. All units, commence operation, she ordered. The battle began. Sovereignty defense platforms opened fire immediately. 2 Allied vessels were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. The human ships scattered, drawing fire, buying time for the shuttle to slip through. Aboard that shuttle, Thorne checked his weapons while Lysara guided them toward a maintenance port that should have been sealed decades ago. We will have 6 minutes once inside, she said. 3 to reach the core. 1 to trigger the overload. 2 to reach the ambassador. And then? She did not answer. They both knew. There was no exit strategy. The shuttle slipped through the fortress's outer shell. Alarms began to wail. Security forces were already mobilizing Dot in his cell. Ambassador David Webb heard the alarms and understood. Someone was coming for him. His people had not abandoned him. He stood, despite his injuries, despite the guards pointing weapons at his chest. You should run, he told them calmly. My species does not forgive those who harm their own. The guards laughed. They were still laughing when the power died. 4 minutes of darkness. 4 minutes of chaos. 4 minutes that would decide the fate of 2 civilizations. Colonel Thorne and Sub-Commander Lysara fought their way through corridors filled with panicking aliens. Their weapons ran dry. They used knives and fists and anything they could find. Lysara took a wound that should have killed her. She kept moving. Thorne's old injuries reopened. Blood soaked through his uniform. He kept fighting, and in the execution chamber, Ambassador David Webb faced his would-be killers and refused to kneel. The power flickered. Emergency systems struggled to restore function. Thorne burst through the door, weapon raised. 3 guards remained. 3 bullets left. He did not miss. David caught Thorn as the colonel collapsed. Lizara staggered in behind them, her crystalline form cracked and dim. "We need to move," she gasped. "The power will return in 90 seconds. David looked at the two beings who had come to save him. A human soldier who had nothing left to give. An alien who had betrayed everything to do what was right. "Can you walk?" he asked Lizara. "No." Her voice was fading. "But I can crawl. And I can hold this door." She pressed something into Thorn's hand. A data chip. "My people's weaknesses. Our fleet positions. Everything you need to end this war." Her eyes, dimming but still fierce, met David's. "Make it matter." The power returned. Fortress Corinth roared back to life, and two humans ran for freedom, while one alien stayed behind to buy them time they could never repay. The escape shuttle tore through Fortress Corinth's hangar bay with enemy fire screaming past its hull. Colonel Thorn was unconscious, his body finally surrendering to wounds no human should have survived. Ambassador David Webb sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on controls he had learned to use 30 years ago during his naval training. Behind them, the fortress lit up with explosions. Lizara had done more than hold a door. She had triggered secondary overloads throughout the station, buying them precious seconds. "This is Ambassador Webb to any Allied vessel," David broadcast. "We are clear of the fortress. Request immediate extraction." Static answered, and a voice he recognized. "Ambassador, this is Captain Alana Santos of the recovery ship Dawn. We have you on sensors. Hold your course. We are coming to you." The Dawn was a modified freighter, fast and lightly armed, designed for exactly this kind of mission. It swept in through the chaos of battle, its cargo bay doors opening to swallow the escape shuttle whole. David did not allow himself to breathe until those doors closed behind them. Medics rushed to Thorn immediately. David watched them work, watched the blood and the desperate efficiency, and felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. "He will live," the lead medic said finally. "Barely, but he will live." David nodded slowly. Then he turned to the communications officer. "Get me Admiral Cross." Aboard the Relentless, Admiral Helena Cross watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The rescue mission had succeeded, but the cost was severe. 11 ships lost, 342 casualties, and the Sovereignty was already regrouping. "Ambassador," she said when a connection established, "it is good to hear your voice." "It is good to be heard, Admiral. What is our situation?" "The Sovereignty is massing their fleet at the Nexus Corridor. Our best estimate is 4,000 warships. They intend to push through to Earth." David absorbed this. 4,000 ships. Even with the Allied coalition, humanity could muster perhaps 1,800. The math was not encouraging. "And Project Final Light?" Helena's expression tightened. "Ready to activate on your command. But if we trigger it, we kill billions of innocent beings. Species that have nothing to do with this war." "I know." David closed his eyes. "We designed it as a deterrent. A gun we never wanted to fire. The question is whether the Sovereignty believes we will fire it." David remembered Colvith's face in the tribunal hall. The ancient certainty, the mechanical contempt. "They do not believe us," he said. "They think we are bluffing. They think that because we value life, we will not take it. Are they right?" The question hung between them. It was the question humanity had been asking itself since the moment they discovered they were not alone in the universe. How far would they go to survive? What lines would they cross? "Patch me through to Earth," David said. "I need to speak with President Thomas." The connection took 3 minutes to establish across the vast distances. When Victoria's face appeared, she looked like she had not slept in days. "David, thank God you are alive. For now." He did not waste time on pleasantries. "Victoria, we need to discuss the contingency." Her expression hardened. You mean triggering final light? No, I mean offering them one last chance to avoid it. Silence stretched between worlds. I want to address the sovereignty directly, David continued. Not Kolveth, not the military council, every species, every citizen. I want to show them what they are fighting and ask them if this war is worth dying for. The sovereignty will never allow it. They do not have to allow it. Lysara gave us something before she died. Access codes to the sovereignty's emergency broadcast system. We can hijack every screen, every speaker, every display in their space. For approximately 3 minutes before they shut us down. Victoria considered this. And what will you tell them? The truth. About what their leaders have done. About W. What we are prepared to do. And about the alternative. Dr. Amara Cole had been working for 48 hours straight. The data Lysara had provided was more comprehensive than they could have hoped. Fleet positions, supply lines, political divisions within the sovereignty's ruling coalition. And something else. Something that changed everything. She burst onto the bridge of the dawn just as David finished his conversation with Earth. Ambassador, you need to see this. She pulled up a holographic display. Star maps, energy signatures, hidden installations. This is the real reason the sovereignty has ruled for 12,000 years, Amara explained. It is not their military. It is not their technology. It is this. She highlighted a network of stations spread across the galaxy. Each one pulsed with energy readings that dwarfed anything humanity had ever measured. They call it the Leash, a system of weapons platforms that can target any planet in their space within minutes. Every species that joins the sovereignty has one pointed at their homeworld. Permanent deterrent, permanent control. David stared at the display. They keep their member species in line through fear of extinction. Exactly. But here is the critical part. The leash requires constant power from a central hub. That hub is located on the sovereignty homeworld in a facility called the Eternal Core. And if that core were destroyed, every station in the network goes dark, permanently. David felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly. Purpose. The sovereignty would lose their leverage over 800 species instantly. More than that, Amara said. Those species would be free to choose. Many of them might choose to fight alongside us. Some might simply stay neutral. Either way, the sovereignty would no longer be able to hold them hostage. The plan began to form. Not an attack on the sovereignty fleet. Not a desperate defense of Earth. Something far more ambitious. We need to get to that core, David said. Impossible. Helena's voice came through the communication link. The sovereignty homeworld is the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. We would lose our entire fleet before reaching the surface. And we do not use our fleet. David turned to face the tactical display. We use one ship, a small team. Someone the sovereignty is not expecting. Who? David smiled, and for the first time since his capture, there was genuine warmth in it. Me. The response was immediate and universal. Absolutely not. President Thomas refused. Admiral Cross refused. Every military advisor and political counselor humanity possessed refused. But David Webb had not survived 30 years of diplomacy without learning how to be stubborn. I am the one person in this galaxy that Kolveth will want to see dead personally, he argued. If I offer myself as bait, he will be so focused on me that he might not notice a small team infiltrating the Eternal Core. You would be sacrificing yourself. I am already dead. The moment they captured me, I accepted that my life was over. The only question is whether my death means something. In the end, they could not stop him. Ambassador David Webb was not a soldier. He could not be ordered. And humanity needed someone willing to stand in front of the enemy and hold their attention. The broadcast went out 12 hours later. Every screen in sovereignty space lit up with David's face. "My name is David Webb. You have been told that humanity is a threat to galactic peace. You have been told that we must be destroyed for your safety. I am here to tell you the truth." He spoke for 3 minutes. He told them about the leash. He told them about the slave colonies. He told them about the species that had been erased from history for daring to question their rulers. And then he told them what humanity was prepared to do. "In 6 hours, your leaders will send their fleet to Earth. They will try to end our species forever, but we will not die quietly. We have weapons hidden throughout your space, weapons that will turn your stars into graves if we are destroyed." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But we do not want to use them. We want peace. We want partnership. We want to build something better than the empire of fear you have been trapped in for 12,000 years. His eyes, tired and wounded, still blazed with conviction. "You have a choice. Stand with your masters and watch the galaxy burn, or stand with us and watch it heal. The decision is yours, and you have 6 hours to make it." The transmission ended, and across the sovereignty, 800 species began to realize they had never really had a choice before. Now they did. The Battle of the Nexus Corridor began at dawn. Measured by Earth's sun. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of the Relentless and watched 4,000 enemy warships emerge from hyperspace. Behind her, humanity's fleet waited. 1,800 vessels crewed by humans, plus 400 more from species that had answered Ambassador Webb's call. Against the Sovereignty Armada, they looked like children facing giants, but children could be surprisingly dangerous. "All ships, execute Formation Hydra," Helena ordered. The human fleet scattered, not in retreat, but in deliberate chaos. Small squadrons broke away, each one moving unpredictably, each one presenting a different threat. The Sovereignty commanders expected a solid line of battle. They got a swarm. Grand Marshal Vorth watched the human maneuvers with contempt. They run like prey animals. All ships, pursue and destroy. It was exactly what Helena wanted. The Sovereignty fleet spread out, chasing individual squadrons, losing their cohesion. And as they did, the human ships began to fight in ways the aliens had never seen. They used asteroids as shields. They detonated weapons in their own wake to create sensor shadows. They rammed damaged vessels into enemy formations rather than let them be captured. Every tactic humanity had developed over millennia of warfare, refined and adapted for the void between stars. 3 hours into the battle, the Sovereignty had lost 800 ships. Humanity had lost 300. The math was still against them, but it was closer than anyone had expected. And then the allied species began to move. Across the galaxy, populations that had been held hostage by the leash network rose up. They did not have weapons. They did not have fleets. But they had numbers, and they had rage accumulated over 12,000 years of slavery. Sovereignty installations were overrun by workers who refused to work. Communication hubs went dark as technicians sabotaged their own systems. Supply lines collapsed as freighter crews dumped their cargo into the void. Supreme Arbiter Colvith watched his empire crumble and felt something he had not experienced in millennia. "Fear. Find the human ambassador," he commanded. "He is the key to this. Kill him, and their alliance falls apart." But David Webb was already gone, the small shuttle carrying. David and 4 volunteers slipped through the chaos of battle unseen. Dr. Amara Cole piloted while David reviewed the infiltration plan one final time. With them were 3 soldiers from Earth's Special Operations Division, trained for exactly this kind of impossible mission. "We will have 10 minutes once we reach the Eternal Core," Amara said. "The facility's defenses are automated, but not particularly sophisticated. They never expected anyone to get this far." David nodded. "And once we destroy the core, the leash network goes permanently offline. Every species in the sovereignty will be free. And us? Amara did not answer. They both knew the core's destruction would take the facility with it. There was no extraction planned. The shuttle landed in a maintenance bay on the sovereignty homeworld. Alarms were already wailing across the planet, but the chaos worked in their favor. No one was looking for a single small craft. They moved fast, through corridors designed for beings twice their size, past security checkpoints abandoned by guards rushing to more critical emergencies, toward the heart of an empire that had ruled the galaxy since before humanity discovered fire. David's body was failing. The wounds from his captivity had never fully healed. Every step was agony. But he kept moving. They reached the eternal core with 2 minutes to spare. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. A sphere of pure energy suspended in a chamber the size of a cathedral. Conduits spread from it like the roots of some impossibly ancient tree, carrying power to weapons that held 800 worlds hostage. Set the charges, David ordered. The soldiers worked quickly. Amara monitored the energy readings, calculating the blast radius, confirming what they already knew. This facility would cease to exist in approximately 5 minutes, and everyone inside it would cease with it. David opened a communication channel, his final broadcast. This is Ambassador David Webb to all human forces. The eternal core is about to be destroyed. When it falls, the leash network falls with it. The sovereignty will lose their greatest weapon. Use this moment. End this war. Static crackled, then Helena's voice rough with emotion. David, there must be another way. We can send extraction. We can. No time, Helena. His voice was gentle. This is what I chose. This is what I was always am. Ain't to do. He looked at the team around him. Amara, who had dedicated her life to understanding alien minds. The 3 soldiers whose names he had only learned yesterday. All of them calm. All of them ready. Humanity does not ask its children to die for mistakes their fathers made, he said, echoing words he had spoken in another time, another place. But sometimes we choose to die for the future our children deserve. The charge is armed. Helena, tell Victoria that I am proud of her. Tell Earth that I never doubted them for a moment. And tell the galaxy that this is who we are. We protect. We sacrifice. And we never, ever give up. He closed the channel. The eternal core exploded in a burst of light, visible from orbit. And across the galaxy. 800 planets felt the chains around their necks finally break. The battle ended within hours. Without the leash, the sovereignty's member species had no reason to fight. Many turned on their former masters. Others simply withdrew, refusing to die for an empire that had held them hostage. Grand Marshal Vorith fell when his own bridge crew mutinied. Supreme Arbiter, Colvith was captured by Admiral Cross personally. He was found in his throne room, staring at displays that showed his fleet in ruins and his empire in flames. You have destroyed everything, he said when Helena entered. No, she replied. We destroyed a cage. What grows in its place is up to everyone who was trapped inside. 6 months later, the Galactic Assembly met for the first time. Not a sovereignty. Not a tribunal. A true assembly where every species had a voice. Dr. Amara Cole's sacrifice had not been in vain. In the moments before the explosion, she had transmitted the complete record of humanity's diplomatic philosophy to every world in the former sovereignty. Her final gift to a galaxy she had spent her life trying to understand. President Victoria Thomas addressed the assembly on behalf of Earth. She spoke of loss. She spoke of hope. She spoke of the future they could build together. And when she finished, she unveiled a monument that would stand at the center of the new galactic capital forever. It bore the names of every being who had died in the war, human and alien alike. At its base, an inscription in every known language. We came in peace. We were met with war. We chose to fight. We chose to forgive. We chose to build. This is humanity. Colonel James Thorne, recovered but forever changed, attended the ceremony in a wheelchair. Beside him sat a young sovereignty female, the daughter of Sub-Commander Lysara, who had been smuggled to safety before her mother's final mission. She would have liked this, the young alien said, watching the monument's dedication. She would have demanded better speeches, Thorne replied, and smiled for the first time in months. Admiral Helena Cross retired from military service the following year. Her final order was to begin decommissioning Project Final Light. The weapons platforms that humanity had hidden throughout the galaxy were dismantled. One by one, their components repurposed for construction rather than destruction. But she kept one. A single platform, hidden in a system nobody visited, its coordinates known only to 3 people. Just in case, because humanity had learned something in the stars. Trust was built. Peace was earned. But survival required remembering that the darkness between worlds held more than light and wonder, that it held threats that might never come. And when you were 8 billion souls on a single fragile planet, you prepared for everything. On the anniversary of David Webb's death, a new tradition began. Across Earth and across the 100 worlds that now called humanity friend, beings of every shape and origin stopped what they were doing and observed a moment of silence, not for sorrow, for gratitude. And in the quiet of that moment, a message was transmitted from Earth's memorial satellite. The same message, every year, forever. You chose war. We chose to show you how we fight. And then we chose to show you how we build. This is our legacy. This is our gift. This is who we are. The galaxy had seen humanity at its worst and at its best. They had seen what 8 billion beings could do when they stood united against extinction. And they had learned the most important lesson of all. Never threaten a human. Not because they would destroy you, but because they would give everything, sacrifice everything, endure everything, to prove that there was a better way. The stars had never been LONELIER. Now, thanks to the species that should not have won, they never would be again.